Hi, guys, and welcome to Pathways. And today I have Hayden Flohr with me here on today's episode. And I'm so excited today to get to know Hayden. And just before we went live on this recording, I said that Hayden is a bit of a mystery to me, which makes it so exciting to have this conversation with her here. And I came across Hayden's X account, I think a few months ago or something like that, maybe. I never started interacting with her, but only recently did I start interacting with her and really listening or taking into account and reading her content. And I discovered there was so much good stuff there, and so much badassery, and so much boldness, and so much wisdom there that I felt like, okay, I need to talk to this Hayden Flohr and hear what she has to say. And I'm sure that you have an amazing story, and which is why I'm sitting here today. I'm so excited for you to be here, and I'm grateful that you have said yes to this conversation. So
Yeah,
tell
thank
me,
you.
Hayden, who are you in your own words?
Oh gosh. This
Mm.
is like one of those interview questions that's impossible to answer.
Yes.
But obviously I'm a business coach, but so much deeper than that. I am one of those people who's obsessed with business because of what happens behind the business, not because of what happens in the face, that everyone else sees or the brand that everyone else sees. It's been a really humbling journey in the business world because I come from a business coaching agency, which I'm sure we'll get into, where everything that we did was strategy, systems, delegate, automate, SOP, like very by the book. This is how it's always been done. This is how you should do it. This is what worked for us. And once I left that agency, because we were working with like high multi-six, multi-seven figure coaches and entrepreneurs, and it was always incredible to me how you could have, X amount of people in the coaching space use your quote unquote seven figure systems and automations and be massively successful. Whereas on the flip side, you could have just as many people who would crash and burn out and want to melt their businesses to the ground. And so when I left that agency, that's really where I became obsessed with what's the crossover in business of the energy and the mindset portion versus what's actually necessary from the strategy component. And I think what I love about myself and my brain and my business is that I can hold space for all of those pieces equally without giving too much precedent to one over the other, which I think is probably what makes my brand a little bit more unique to people when they see it, because they're so used to seeing people either talk about the strategy side of things or the energetic side of things or the mindset side of things. And I kind of hold space and obsess with all of them equally, and talk about them all equally. So yeah, I'm obviously a business coach, but I'm much more focused on what happens behind the business and why things are or aren't successful as I am about the action, strategy, SOP component of business, because those are the things that everyone can do. And if that was the solution to everyone being massively successful, if it was that simple, we all would be billionaires on repeat over and over
Yeah.
and over again. So really just kind of a crazy lady who loves business and who is obsessed with what goes on behind the business, because it's so much more fun than what goes on, in between the strategy and the automations, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So what does go on behind the business in your experience?
Oh, that crazy organ that lives up here, your brain, and most importantly, which I think a lot of people are maybe coming into a newfound realization of, but energy, aka passion, life force, purpose, whatever that word means to you, it's kind of used interchangeably, but it all means the same thing. And really, how can we show up for our business as 100% of who we are without holding a single piece of ourselves back? Because so many brands and businesses do, especially when they're strategy focused, or they're trying to close the gap between $10,000 months and $20,000 months. They always hit the pavement really, really hard with strategy tweaks and content tweaks and closing more sales, when while they're doing those things, they're sucking the life out of themselves and their businesses, which is why coaches especially see such a high burnout rate over and over and over again in businesses, because it's not actually the strategy that's doing all the work for you. It's really you working against yourself in your business and putting your priorities on things that actually aren't going to move the needle. So behind the business, mindset, passion, energy, and really being able to bring those things together to show up for your business without holding a piece of yourself back. Another way to say that would be alignment, but I think alignment is it's like a trigger word in business these days, because people are like, yeah, alignment, I've heard that before.
Yeah. Because that's what you did for yourself, wasn't it? You went
Mm-hmm.
from this position at this company agency, and you felt that, okay, there's something is wrong here, or something is not working for me. So what can you tell me a bit about what did that process look for you?
It was kind of interesting because my journey in business, up until that point at my agency, I hadn't been in business for very long. When I graduated college, that was when I started my first coaching business. My very first business coach that I hired literally had to teach me all the P's and Q's of social media, content writing, copywriting. I picked it up really fast. And about 6 months after I started my coaching business is when I got recruited and hired by this coaching agency I did a lot. So that's a whole nother story, but it was one of those opportunities where you're like, I'm so underqualified for this position. I cannot believe that whatever they see on the outside is something that they want to invest in. I feel like I'd be silly not to say yes, even if I am scared that I'm going to land on my face or fail or whatever it is. So I kind of gaslit myself into taking that position, which I'm so happy that I did. And it was one of the most wonderful experiences for me for the longevity of my career, because what was cool about this agency was we all worked together with clients. So there was a team of 5 coaches, each one of us specializing in something different. So we had one coach who specialized in EFT, another coach who's specialized in like automations and delegation, another coach that specialized in content marketing and sales. And so we would all come together to serve our clients. And it was this brilliant Mod Podge experience of really being able to see how, because they kind of kept things separately, right? Like if you were having an off day and didn't have the bandwidth to work on strategy, then your coach that you were supposed to work with that day would bounce you over to like the EFT coach. And so it was all very pulled apart and separated. And so one thing that always really bothered me is I'm like, our clients have no idea how to use these things interconnectedly, right? Like they don't know how, when they're sitting down to work on their strategy and they start getting riled up and they're on the verge of a meltdown, how to actually regulate and neutralize and work themselves through those things so they can make better decisions in their business. And so when I left my business, I didn't exactly have a ton of experience with that. In my own business, I had experience doing it with other clients. It's a completely different ballgame when you're working with someone else's business versus when you're working with your own. It's a lot more personal. There's a lot more pressure on the line.
Yeah.
And so when I started this brand and I came onto X, it really started out as an experiment, a full-blown experiment. Like I know how to run a business. I've been for 2 years paid every single day to coach people on running their business. I picked it up very, very quick. It's very easy, strategically. So now I get to play with what's really happening behind the scenes to see if I can build my business in a way that is me, right? It feels good. And even if it doesn't, how do I make it feel good? How do I make the best decisions? How do I, in an industry that's very cut and dry, walk the yellow brick road, straight and narrow, how do I find my own corner of the internet where no one can touch me because no one's ever going to outdo me, right? And so that's really where my X journey started, was a total experiment of, can I be brash and crazy and believe, I guess more so than have, in these wild beliefs that I want to be true about how businesses get to be run. And yeah, prove to myself and other people over and over and over again that really what makes not just coaches, but entrepreneurs successful is really being able to stand for what you want to see in your business, stay in your lane and execute it to the millionth degree, regardless of what's going on inside or out of you, to really have the business that you want to run. So there wasn't necessarily anything in particular when I left my agency that was like, oh, I have to work on this. It really was an overhaul of everything that I knew about business, because I wanted it to exist together. I wanted it all to weave together and feel really light, because most people, they're like, oh, I read all the self-help books, I read all the business books, yet those two worlds feel so independent. Like, oh, today I have to work on my strategy and tomorrow I'll work on my mindset. And it's like, no, it all comes together. It feeds off each other constantly. So that was really my experiment when I came on Twitter a few years ago was, can I be crazy enough to try to do things differently and show people what's possible? And that's really where my business has gone nowadays. Is my clients always say, like, you showed me what was possible for my business. And it's not because their business looks like mine. It's not because they have the same beliefs as me. It's not even because they want the same things as me. It's just the work that we do together cracks open these areas of their mind in their business where you're like, oh, I don't actually want it to be like the way I've always been taught it's supposed to be. I actually want it to be like this. Now, how do I show up for this without backing down, talking myself out of it, making myself feel small, all of those things? And they end up getting these big, glorious, wonderful things that they always wanted from their business. And the best part is they're getting it in ways that feel very good, very light, very expected and laid back, as opposed to being like an emotional live wire all the time, wondering when things are going to burn to the ground, wondering when the money's going to stop coming in, wondering, or worrying all the time about what's coming next. They really get to settle into life and enjoy what it's like to run a really successful business and have a life that you really, really enjoy living at the exact same time. So that was a really roundabout way of coming about that, but it really was about bringing everything together under one roof and being able to understand it, as opposed to feeling isolated in one element of business over the other.
So when I'm listening to you, you're not saying that strategy is not important, but you're saying
Mm-mm.
that strategy, if it stands on its own, might even build a good business, right? But it will leave you feeling not like yourself, like you're working against yourself, you're making yourself small, you're feeling I don't want to use the word aligned or misaligned, but you're feeling like, something is wrong here. Your
Yeah.
very intuition tells you, no, I'm not happy, I'm doing this. Might be successful or might not be successful, right? Depending on what you're doing, right? Business might be growing or not growing, but regardless, there's something missing here. That's
Yeah.
what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, absolutely. Strategy, I mean, there's no one on the planet who's going to argue that strategy is not important. Sometimes people will. They'll be like, oh, strategy's out and energy work is in. No, they can't. They're not independent of each other. They actually feed on each other. And everyone gets to a point in business. Once you get past the foundational elements, like learning how to write good sales copy, not even like the best sales copy, not even scroll stopping sales content. You just have to learn how to write good copy for the people who want to pay you. That's it. You don't have to be a brilliant salesman. There is absolutely, I'm not going to say none. The skill set to be a good salesman is being a neutral, normal, warm, open, authentic human being, right? Doing all of those things is all energy and mindset work. It's not a strategy or some skill that you can pick up in a book. And so once you get past the very basic foundational elements of growing a business, decent copywriting, decent sales techniques, like that's literally all you need. Everything that happens beyond that is really how far can you take it, and how, when you talk about like brand authority, being seen, all of that's energy. People who buy from you are buying from you because they can feel you, right? If they're not feeling who you really are, what you really want to sell, what you're really all about, because you're hiding pieces of yourself behind the scenes, then they're never going to invest in you. If you believe that people don't want to invest in you, they're not going to invest in you. So it's really, how can we nail the foundations of strategy, which are pretty simple, and then grow with everything else that happens behind the scenes, right? Because that's ultimately the fulfillment portion of it too. Passion, purpose, excitement, satisfaction, that's all energy. Those are all things we feel. and the desires that we have in our business at the end of the day, whatever they are, impact, service, money, it's all, we want all of those things to hopefully make us feel what we think we'll feel: passion, purpose, excitement, satisfaction. And so being able to curate, manipulate, use, regulate that energy to get what we want is going to expand the strategy. It's going to make the strategy more potent in every way, shape, and form. And it's going to do it in only the way that you can. So your business is going to be untouchable. It's going to be recession proof, because no one's ever going to be able to put a damper on that in any way, shape, or form when you're running your business from that level of awareness, authenticity, whatever you want to call
It requires self-love. It requires
it.
that you're willing to show yourself for yourself, not only for other people. It requires you to actually believe that I'm a person who is worthwhile investing in, right? It requires you to believe or bust the belief that I'm a phony, or nobody's going to believe me, or nobody's going to like me because I don't like myself.
Yep.
So it sounds to me that part of business, the strategy part is the easy part. The most important part is the work on yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yep, because the strategy, we tend to believe that strategy is the thing that we can control, right? Think about any school system growing up, regardless of where you grew up, right? Teachers, professors, they tell you what to do, you go home, you do it, you come back to school the next day, they tell you what to do again, you do it, right? And so when we expect that to be the same in entrepreneurship, it's not. There's no one telling us who we're allowed to be. There's no one telling us who we are. There's no one telling us what's going to make us uniquely successful. That's something that we have to uncover in business. And so when strategy becomes the only thing that we think we have control over, we make a lot of really poor decisions in our business that aren't actually aligned with what we're trying to do, where we're trying to go, the life that we actually want to build. One of my favorite quotes is, build for the business you want, not the one you have. And people will chase strategy that they don't actually want to chase, while reaffirming the business that they currently have, not the one that they're trying to grow into, if that makes sense. So it takes this, you have to nail those core beliefs in the beginning. Once you nail those core beliefs, like, I'm worthy of this, I deserve to be heard, people want to hear what I have to say, everything else you do after the fact is really just building off of those. Because again, like I said, sales and marketing comes down to you genuinely believing that you deserve to be heard and you have something that people want to say, because your audience is always picking up on that. The people who buy from you are picking up on that. The people who are listening and watching your content are picking up on that too. So really, how can we bottle that up and use it every day, every second, whenever we want it or whenever we need it?
Yeah. And how do you actually get to that point where you, in your experience, in the work that you're doing with yourself and with other, like with your clients, what do you think is the biggest obstacle that you find for people to actually believe in themselves, love themselves? Because when I read your content, it's so clear to me. It's so clear to me that you're a person who have stepped into like your own pants. And I don't know if that is an expression, but you know what I mean? Like, you truly love, like you truly love like your skin, right? You love your skin. You love like what you're doing. You love being you. And you're not trying to like hide that you're doing it, like it's not, it doesn't come off as like you're braggy or anything like that. It's simply, this is Hayden, and she loves herself, she loves her own skin. And if people tell her that she shouldn't love herself, or that she's mistaken and she's taking the wrong route, or it's the strategy that you're using is not the best one, you're like, hey, I don't care. I like what I do, and I know what I do. Like, I love what I do, and I'm inviting people into this kind of life, right? That's what you're doing. You're inviting people into this kind of life. But how do you work with that invitation? Like, okay, that attracts obviously people towards you, right? When you're in social media and other spaces. And like, how do you work with people that haven't come to that point where you are? And how did you work on that, like, yourself? Have you always been like that?
No, well, I've always been a little stubborn. there's never been anyone in my life who's ever been able to convince me to do something that I don't want to do. Yeah. So there's kind of a roundabout answer to that. So the first thing that I'll say is at this point in my career, I've been coaching for going on 5 years now, and I'm also an athlete. I played college sports, and what makes someone coachable is working with someone who doesn't need to be convinced to do the work. And so the one thing that I see is the biggest obstacle for entrepreneurs of all shapes and forms is that they want to believe that they're capable of having the things that they want while not actually believing that it's possible. They're waiting for some sort of evidence to show up in their life to validate or confirm the things that they want, but that's not how it works. You have to believe that you are capable of having all of the things that you want and be able to hold that belief and that vision regardless of what's happening around you. And that's what makes it tough to work with someone. And I mean that with all the love in the world. When you have to convince someone to believe that they can have the things that you want, just the coach client partnership, it's not going to work out because you're not functioning on the same wavelength. And so that's really what I do with my content is I really try to change the way that people think. And this kind of goes into the second element of that question is really creating evidence of the things that you want to be true. So, I mean, just think about like a conventional business, right? Say you just joined Twitter, you're starting up your first coaching service, right? You hop on X and you are bombarded with all of this more or less the same information of how to be relevant in a business, right? The copywriting's almost all the same. How many times a day you need to show up is all the same. How many comments you need to leave, right? And so you get inundated and conditioned with all this business strategy. So you start to believe that doing all of those things and carrying that massive load is the only way that you're going to be successful because you've seen so many people who, by the way, are repeating that same strategy aren't successful at all. They're just regurgitating things that they've picked up from other people. So it's like this feedback loop of people all saying the same things and entrepreneurs all believing the same things. But if I were to ask that person, do you actually want any of those things to be true? They would be like, no, I don't want to post 47 times a day in order to be relevant. I don't want to build 7-mile long landing pages in order to convince people to buy from me. And my response to that is great, don't. But the reason that you believe that that's what it's going to take in order for you to be relevant, you're going to show up in your business in a way that's going to prove that to be true for you over and over and over again. And so that's what I try to do with my content is really change the way that people think about what's possible for their business, change the beliefs that they have, the things that they feel like are true but don't need to be true. Because my job when I'm coaching people as a client, my job's not to convince you that those things are possible. You come to me already knowing that those things are possible. The fun work that we get to do in coaching is really expanding those ideas and bringing them to life and all that good stuff. So it really comes down to getting from wanting to believe things can be a certain way or you can have things the way that you want to have them to actively taking action on making things the way that you want to make them. And the reason that I use like posting 47 times a day and 7-mile long landing pages is because that's where I started in business. I did not want those things to be true for me. You know, I have shockingly, I'm one of those. I love my job. I love what I do, but I'm one of those people who has absolutely this much desire to work on my business all day, every day, 25/8. Like I have a brilliant life that I love to live outside of my business. And so that very gross, heavy business strategy that's pumped left, right, and center doesn't align for me. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel useful to me. And so I always had this idea in my head that, like, what if it didn't have to be like that? What if I just, for the sake of everyone else, experimented and tried with what was actually possible? And I did. I started like selling out programs with a landing page that would take you 10 seconds to read. It merely was just a checkout link. And then I learned how to write better content, how to sell people without selling to them in my content so that by the time they did make it to the landing page, they were already sold. All they needed to do was put in their card information. And so as my beliefs about what I wanted to be true in my business changed and how I showed up for them in my business changed, I actually created evidence over and over and over again that, hey, I get what I believe in my business, right? And no one can touch my business these days because I don't run it like them. I don't think about it like them. And that's what makes my brand so appealing is even though most of my clients are way more successful than me or have way bigger audiences than me, they don't have what I have inside my business, which is what they're looking for just on a deeper level. So it really conviction, not being or not needing to be convinced of having the things that you want to have, and then really being able to start creating evidence that supports these beliefs that you want to be true, closing that gap between I want to believe this and this is who I am and this is what I stand for, become one. Creates the biggest gaps for coaches is wanting to believe, like you use one of the wanting to believe that people want to hear me or want to buy from me, and then knowing that they will, right? Those are two different levels of embodiment, two different ways of showing up to business, two different energies that come through in your content. My job is to help you bring them together so that you can have all the things that you want. Does that make sense?
Can you believe without having the evidence? Like
Yes.
when you say evidence, and I hear
Mm-hmm.
feedback from the world, the external world. But can you believe
Mm-hmm.
something to be true without having the feedback from the external world? Let's say I'm a
Mm-hmm.
business coach, or I'm a I'm a spiritual coach, whatever, like business entrepreneur that I am, and I'm good at copy. I'm good at the strategy course. I know how to write copy to bring people to me. To people can identify with what I'm doing, right? And they like what I
Mm-hmm.
do. And then you're good at sales. You're simply being yourself, right? But then believing it to be true without it having been true, without, let's say, I want to have X amount of clients this month
Mm-hmm.
or next month. I want to invite people into my life, into my business, into working with me, but it hasn't happened yet.
Mm-hmm.
How do you work with that?
Yeah. So again, kind of twofold. On one hand, the experience that you're currently having, what beliefs do you have that created that? Right. So again, wanting to believe that it gets to be like this while not actually believing that it's possible, you're gonna create an experience that is in opposition to what you think you want to believe. And so seeing that 3D circumstantial evidence and being like, oh, I guess I can't get what I want. Well, you kind of were asking for that the whole entire time because you didn't actually believe it's possible. You were waiting for something to happen to show you. The other flip side of that, when you're actually working with mending the gap between wanting to believe something is true and actually fully embodying it and believing it, it all comes down to it's what we call identity work, if you're familiar with that or not. It's really changing the identity that you have from one or the other. So take, for example, someone who's a smoker, right? When they're smoking a pack of cigarettes every single day, they identify as a smoker. Someone who wants to quit smoking, but the sun rises tomorrow and they have an itch and they go buy a pack and then they smoke, doesn't identify as someone who doesn't smoke. They identify as someone who smokes sometimes now, right? Because they're weaning back. Someone who no longer smokes and is offered a cigarette is going to say, nope, I don't smoke anymore, because they identify as someone who no longer smokes, right? And so we have to work with taking ideas as something that just like exists in the ether, something that's separate from us, bring them down, anchor them in, and weave it into our personality and our identity so it stops feeling like something that is separate from us or unavailable. Because the further away something feels from us, right, the less attainable it's going to feel, right? And then that's when our head starts to spin, and that's when we take action based on what we think is possible. So it's kind of this feedback loop. But in terms of evidence, when I was probably close to like 18, 20 months ago, I want to say, I removed sales calls from my business. And I decided that I no longer wanted to, one, take sales calls anymore, but two, I didn't want to work with people who needed to get on 2 or 3 calls with me in order to justify a big investment. I wanted people to come to me, apply for my services, reach out to me only if they were 1000% serious about taking the next move. I had never prior to that point closed a high ticket multi-4 5-figure sale in the DMs ever. I had absolutely no contextual experience that was possible for me. But I had a mentor at the time who had just removed sales calls from her business. And so my evidence that I stocked away and held on to so freaking tightly was, if she can do it, I can do it. And here's how I knew that it was aligned for me. And it wasn't just some crazy, like, oh, you're being entitled. People love to believe that, oh, I'm being entitled if I want something to be that easy. When I thought about my business and I imagined having removed sales calls from my business, it flooded me with power. It flooded me with energy. When I sat down and I imagined a world where I was closing 4 and 5-figure sales in the DMs, I could close those sales while I was out on the golf course with my boyfriend. I could wake up to those sales in the morning. I didn't have to hop on and flood my calendar with calls. It filled me with so much excitement and energy and joy. And that's how I knew it was right for me. Okay. So being able to follow those nuggets, that was evidence for me in that moment that, like, if it felt like crap, why would I chase something that feels like crap? If a business that was run on 30 calls a week required me to take 30 private clients a month was right for me, it would feel good. Those things did not feel good for me. So why would I chase that? But most people do. They don't want it, but they've seen that's how it's always done. And so they chase it. And the way that I talked myself through it was, I don't want that. So why would I chase it? Here's what I do want. So here's what I'm going to intentionally create. If it works out, great. I have all of this evidence of what is possible. If it doesn't, I either need to hit the drawing board again and be a little bit more honest with myself about what really lights me up, because the ego can get in the way and things can get a little fuzzy sometimes, or I just need to tweak the way that I'm doing things, right? And it did. It started paying off immediately. I was transparent about my prices, which is something I had never done before. I came from the sales methodology that you get people on the phone and you wait till the end of the call to tell them what the price is because you sell them before you tell them. Gross. How not fun is selling when you have to show up? But it wasn't fun for me. And I came from an agency where I was doing, 7 figures a year in sales, doing it that way. And I hated it. So in my business, I'm like, it doesn't feel good for me. That doesn't give me life. It doesn't make me want to run this business for 10 years. It makes me want to not do it at all. And so, I just started taking action in my business with what little evidence that I had compiled from evidence that I had of my mentor doing it and being wildly successful. One of the things that she shared over and over and over again is when you make a big jump in your strategy like that, there's going to be a gap between execution and results. So be prepared that if it takes 2 weeks or a month or 6 weeks for people to catch on to the change that you just made in your business, that is completely normal. And again, that's the power of mentorship and being in spaces with people who are doing things bigger or differently than you. They can kind of hold your hand through the things that you're going to expect. Whereas if you were doing those things all by yourself, you'd be like, oh, it's been 2 weeks and no one's reached out to me. Oh, better burn this to the ground. This is not right for me. It's not an alignment for me. Oh, all of a sudden there's all this fear in my head. No one's ever going to buy again. I'm going to go bankrupt. I'm never going to make another dollar. And it spirals out of control. And then you just go back to doing the same things that you were doing before, which don't light you up. Don't feed your purpose, right? Don't feed all these things. And so stacking evidence, it's whatever it needs to be in order to keep you in the ring with what you desire. I'm not sure if you're familiar with like the book Ask and It Is Given by Abraham Hicks, but they talk about how you're meant to feel good in all things in life. You are meant to feel good. That's why we have desires, because all of our desires show up in our life, and the things that we don't like act as contrast to show us more of what we do like. And so if we can use the contrast of the things that we don't like or don't want to be true, and we can follow the things that we do want to be true, we're really walking a path of alignment in our life and our business. And so, stacking evidence in whatever way you need to before it becomes 3D circumstance is what actually creates the 3D circumstance. If we wait for our external reality to show us the things that we want to believe in, but don't actually want to believe in, it's never going to show up.
And I think like this was also my experience, and has been my experience since I decided that I'm going to start my own business.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was like, okay, I've never done this before. For me, it was a new business. Like it was
Yeah.
completely new. I had built institutions for higher education, co-founded that. But
Mm-hmm.
it's a completely different story than doing what I'm doing right now, like building my coaching business and guidance
Mm-hmm.
business. And part of that is doing this podcast, obviously. But for me, it was like, I'm not sure exactly what aligns with me or what like makes my heart sing.
Yeah.
So I have to test things.
Yes.
And along the path, as I listen to these gurus about strategies, and I tested some of the things. Some of them worked, some of them didn't work. But more
Mm-hmm.
importantly, many of the things that I tested left me like, I feel like shit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel good about this. Like sales, like I had a way of doing sales before, just as you said. You get on a call first and then give the price at the end, and then you have all these tricks and gimmicks about how to you have bonuses,
Mm-hmm.
and then you use urgency, and you use all of these
Yeah.
kinds of, which fine, do it. It works, like, right, because it uses psychological,
Mm-hmm.
like it uses obviously psychological tricks to make people want to buy or feel the
Yeah.
urge to buy. But it didn't feel right for me at all.
Yeah.
It was not aligned with how I want to do business. So for me, it has been a learning experience, a learning curve to say, no, that's not how I'm doing sales. I
Mm-hmm.
want to do sales by saying, hey, I'm a searcher. I have been a spiritual searcher my entire life. Like I have a PhD in theology.
Yeah.
But for me, it's about healing. Like it's healing for me. I'm working on my own healing, and I'm inviting you into this healing journey.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to be part of that journey, I'd be very happy to have you. If not, then I wish you all the best. Even if you don't want to work with me, for example. So I
Mm-hmm.
changed completely, for example, from being like this, using gimmicks or believing it because it didn't feel good,
Yeah.
to instead saying, this is an invitation. I'm healing, and I'm inviting you to heal as well.
Yep.
Right? And
Yep.
and I think for somebody who's new, I haven't done this as long as you have. Would you say that it takes time to learn
Uh-oh.
this skill? Because it's a skill. It's not only like, okay, now I know what I want. Because what you want today, you don't want to take sales call, but maybe tomorrow you want to do something different. It's a skill to
Mm-hmm.
learn to be aligned, not to be aligned, but to listen to yourself and to listen to your
Yes.
intuition, to listen to how things make you feel, right? And then you say, no,
Mm-hmm.
there's no yes here.
Yes. And that's it. And life mirrors business. And I mean, the best thing, if you want to live a full life, learn how to run a business, is because it will
Yeah,
unearth all of your shit. Excuse my language. It will,
yeah, that's okay.
everything you've ever wanted to avoid, everything you've ever wanted to hide from or become, it is going to make you either get over those things or become those things, whether you're ready for it or not. And that's why entrepreneurship, a lot of people play entrepreneur. I want everyone to have their thing and find their thing, and entrepreneurship is such a wonderful thing. But there are so many people who realize that, oh, this isn't as easy as posting on Twitter X amount of times a day. It's not as easy as reading Alex Hormozy's book and then regurgitating it in my own course and then trying to sell it and trying to make $1 million. You know what I mean? Like, people realize that it's not easy. Running a business, easy. Being someone who can show up for a successful business, hard. Really, really hard. So for people who are at the beginning of their journey in business, because if I could talk to me 5 years ago, 5 years ago, me would have given me the cold shoulder and been like, I don't want your fluffy woo woo BS. Give me the strategy. Tell me what to do. No one works harder than me. I'm gonna make it happen. And it did. It worked for me for a little while until I burnt out and I realized I literally cannot. These 12-hour days that I'm working on my business, all these sales calls that I'm taking all the time, all these clients in theory are great, but there's nothing left inside of me to go live my life, or the way that I'm coaching is not giving me life. You have to have those experiences. Again, contrast shows you more of what you want, more of what you don't want. Contrast shows you where you get to pivot and turn in your life and your business. So for every experiment that you run, for every failed strategy that you execute, it's all information. None of it is good, none of it is bad. It's all just information. How you perceive that information and what you do with it will determine what direction you can take your business and how successful you're going to be doing it. And so a lot of people struggle to take that information and make it mean something that's useful. They make it mean something horrible, or they stay stuck in the same ways, believing that it has to feel like that. It doesn't have to feel like that. And that's why I'm so passionate about being someone who goes first, someone who runs a heart-led business. I'm certified in many, many coaching modalities, but especially modalities like human design and gene keys, where I can flesh apart how people are designed to show up and win at life. And I can give them context. We can pair it with either experiences that they've had in the past or experiences that they have while we're working together to create whole new identities that people can run their business with. The problem is that you have to want those things, right? And so that's where me saying,
And
if
you
I were
can't
to talk
force
to,
it.
yeah, absolutely. Me talking to 5 years ago, I was not in the mindset to want to run my business like that. I wanted to be a 21-year-old millionaire. I wanted to be uber successful, to just, make all of the people in my life who ever doubted me feel small. I wanted a strategy because I knew no one was going to outwork me. I'd always been successful running my life that way. And that was the headspace that I was in. It wasn't until I went through my agency and I chose and was of the mindset starting this new brand that I don't want what I've always had. I've done that. Didn't like it. It worked out to some extent. Didn't like it. Didn't care for it. Don't want to run my business like that for the next 10 years. So where's a new problem, right? Where's a new solution to things? What can I stand for that is more aligned to me than what I was standing for? So really, we talked at the beginning of this whole thing. I'm not here to convince people that this is the way that they should run their business. You can't teach spirituality to a kindergartner, right? I'm not here to convince you that you should believe in energetics or that you should change your mindset. Because if you're stuck in one way and one thing that you think you want, like I don't have the energy to try to convince you otherwise. So it's this beautiful network that I have of people who are either just turning that cusp of like, oh, I see the way she runs her business and I want more of that. I never knew that was possible. That facilitates a ton of transformation in people before ever even having to work with me. But also for people who are deeper in the journey, who have like, I've been doing all the mindset work. I've made tweaks to my strategy. I'm on a healing aligned path in business. Now I need to know how to make it cohesive. I need to know how
Yeah.
to run my life and my business at any given moment and make it feel light with all of these things that I'm learning how to do. So it's this brilliant like Mod Podge of people who are at all different stages of this journey, but they're all on the same side of the journey. There's no stragglers over here who are like, you still need to write landing pages and you still need to post 47 times a day. I'm like, I don't get those people because I don't entertain them. I don't entertain people who have those beliefs. So it is a wonderful era of business that we're going into astrologically and energetically here in a few years, where it's already started. We're working into this evolution, especially in service-based businesses like coaching, where people want and need that. People have learned that it's easy to make money. It's easy to make an account, right? It's easy to put together an offer. What's really freaking hard is being someone who can love themselves, their life, and their business and be able to hold all of it without melting to the ground, regardless of what's going on inside or around them, because that's life. Things happen just like that all the time. And you have to be able to, as a good leader, make decisions that keep you in the game, stay aligned with your vision, stay in the game, stand for what you believe in, use your voice, do all these things that most people aren't teaching when it comes to business because it's hard and they don't understand it. But that's the era of business that we're moving into. And so it's a really wonderful place to be.
Can you fail, and what is failure?
Oh my gosh. For anyone who's going to listen to this, who's familiar with gene keys in human design. I don't know if are you familiar with gene keys in human design at all or not quite?
No, tell me.
No. They're basically, in layman's terms, it's the study of your aura and your energy. And there's five energy types. Every person falls into one category or another, but it's a kind of like a personality test, like Myers-Briggs or stuff like that. But I have major themes in my life of suffering and transmutation. My purpose, literally, contextually, when you look at my gene keys, is to fail, suffer, transmute all that failing and suffering for the collective so that they can make something of it, so that it's wisdom that they can actually utilize. A lot of people look at my chart and they're like, ouch, does life hurt? And I'm like, yeah, life hurts. But if you look at like my journey as an entrepreneur, that's been the theme, right? When my first business was burning to the ground and I was in a deep and dark place that totally was not aligned with who I wanted to be, in came an offer from an agency that showed me the initial foundation of what my business would be today. I went with them when things no longer not aligned. I crashed the ground. It was awful. It was super painful. I left my job, had no idea what the hell I was doing. Boom, all of a sudden, I got the courage to start this brand. And now this is what you see today. And so I have made a very secure relationship with failure because it's going to happen. I don't care if you make $10 a month or $10 million a month, you are going to fall flat on your face. And one thing that I think a lot of people tell a really awful and painful story about is when you're in business and your motive, like you mentioned, like, I want to heal. I'm here for healing. Me too. Okay. But with healing comes evolution. As a coach, if you're a good coach, you put yourself in the ring over and over and over again to fail, because what you learn in those failures is what people are going to pay you thousands and thousands of dollars for, whether it's 3 months from now or 3 years from now. Your failures are what make you unique from every single person around you. I have a really good friend. Her name is Leanne. She's in our community. You might have seen her. She was chronically ill a few years ago, like on her deathbed ill. And now she's a holistic chronic trauma, chronic illness coach. So her biggest, most heart-wrenching, quote unquote, failure, which was her body, has now become the thing that people pay her thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for. And so I think it's really useful for us to tell good stories about failure. One, everyone eats shit. I just saw a TikTok yesterday of Alex Hormozy talking about how his first 9 businesses failed. 9. And the 10th one was the one that made it. But over the course of those 9 businesses, we're talking about 15 years, 18 years of eating the pavement over and over and over again. And what separates him from everyone else is the story he told himself about those failures. Failure didn't mean I'm not worth it. It's never going to happen. I can't have what I want. Failure meant I'm one step closer. This didn't work, but the next one is. I tell my clients, it doesn't matter if it's true, whatever feels useful to you, whatever you can tell yourself that floods your body with energy, keeps you in the ring, connects you to that vision, you got to ride that bad boy out until the day that you die, because everyone else is going to give up on what's useful for them and they're going to settle for what they already know to be true. So I love failure. Failure to me has always been, again, 5 years ago, me, if I would say I love failure, I would have punched myself in the head. I would be like, shut up. We don't fail. Failure's not good. But it is, because it differentiates you in the business economy, because no one else is going to fail the way that you can fail. And no one's going to learn the lessons that you learn from your own failures. So it makes you different. It makes you more resilient. It makes you stronger. And every failure puts you back on the path of where you're supposed to be. It's so easy in business to make one decision that really doesn't seem like the wrong thing or a bad thing. But if you make that same decision 15 times in a row, suddenly you have no idea where you are in your business. Suddenly everything feels wrong. Everything has to come to a screeching halt. It would be easy to say, I messed it all up. I'm not built for this. I'm never going to have the things that I want. My desires, forget those things. People don't get what they want. No, it's not useful. That makes me feel like shit. Believing that makes me feel like shit. If I feel like that, I'm not where I'm supposed to be. So what stories do I need to tell myself to get myself back on the path that I know I want to be on, I need to be on, I'm going to be on? That's all life and business is. Taking information from external or internal and telling a story about it that is useful. That's what memories are, right? We perceive something, we experience something, we tell a story about it, it gets locked away in our brain, we remember it for years down the road. So why don't we do the same thing with information in our business, right? So that's my take on the whole thing is no one's going to outwork me, but also no one is going to outthink me either. There's no one who works harder than me at staying on the right path, because that is where I'm meant to be, whether I eat it face first on the pavement or not. I can use all of that information to get me to my next level in business. And so back to that point about evolution, if you're a good coach and you're constantly healing, you're constantly evolving. So that means that what works for you today, potentially in 6 weeks or 6 months, no longer works for you or is relevant because you've outgrown it. So how do you, as someone who's busted your butt on this thing for 6 months, can you let go of that thing to make space for the next thing? Can you move on to the next level of healing, or are you gripping so tight? So coaches and entrepreneurs have to get so good about, the hero's journey, working their butt off for something, trial, error, suffer, meet your mentor, come out on top, solve the problem, reap the rewards, and then start that cycle all over again. Because you're never going to figure it out and then just ride the coattails of one thing. It's going to be one after another after another.
I have two questions.
Mm-hmm.
One is superficial and one is deeper, I think. How do you do marketing? It's a tactic, so it's a very superficial question. But let's give it to the listeners.
How I do marketing, it's evolved over time. Again, when you want to talk about foundational strategy, obviously marketing falls into one of those buckets. It takes, for beginner businesses who are listening, it takes time for you to establish credibility and authority in your thoughts, in your ideas, in your practices, in your offers. There will come a point, and so your marketing has to be consistent. It's got to be nails. You got to show up for your business every day pretty much, but there will come a point in your business, which is where I'm at now, where I've established so much credibility, and authority that's not my marketing. My daily marketing isn't what runs my business. My brand is what runs my business. So when you ask about marketing, are you talking about just like content in general?
Not content in general, because like you said, there are different, you can be in different stages in your business. I understand that when you have created a strong brand where you have authority and you have visibility, then people seek you out because you have a community already of people that want to work with you, or they're interested in you, and then they obviously, you engage them and they engage with you through reading your content and everything that you put out in the world, whether it's newsletter or whether it's tweets, whatever that is, or podcast. That's a mature business, right? But in the first part of the business, there's a lot of, why I'm asking this, because there's a lot of information again on X.
Yes.
And this, especially for newcomers, for beginners, how they should do marketing. You do automations, you do this, you do that, you, like you said, 49 messages per day, or this, you have to show up 50 times per day. Yeah. You have to comment for 5 hours every day, or stuff like that, right? That's, or you have to be visible, right? You have to show, you have to be visible, and then there are different tactics for that. So what would you say is like marketing in the sense of in the initial stages of a business, and or when you have established your brand so that it's more mature?
Yeah. One thing that I would say is that, again, we've had this conversation about all information can be used. Every experience that you have in your business is just information that you can use to either create the same experience, an old experience, or a new experience. And for beginner businesses, it takes repetitions to figure out what's aligned for me, what fits within my energetic capacity, what feels good, what doesn't. Because what happens is that a lot of people will mistake doing what feels good with doing something that feels good because you're avoiding doing the right thing that's hard. The right thing is hard sometimes. And so for beginner businesses, it does take reps in sending the messages, sending the tweets, being in the comments, posting however many times a day you need to post, learning how to be consistent with creativity. Because that's another hard part. A lot of people are like, well, what do I write content on? That's a skill, right? And that's only a skill that you learn how to do with time and repetition. And so I would say utilize that time to create stories about what the experience gets to be moving forward. That's how I did it. That's how every coach that I work with now who's in the high 6-figure, 7-figure range has been able to run their business, is by figuring out what does and doesn't work, right? And so when it comes to marketing, my greatest advice is to do all the things, because you're very quickly going to realize that this is where I want to lean towards, and this is what I want to lean away from. The second piece of that is a lot of marketing comes down to healing. Where am I hiding pieces of myself or my whole self? Where am I, trying to ride someone else's coattails? Where am I not being authentic? It's so easy when you're wrapped up in strategy to be like, I have to post X amount of times a day, so I need to, I don't know, I need to find creators and I need to gather inspiration from their tweets and I need to do all of these things in order to make that happen. Well, are you actually showing up for that in a way that is healthy and aligned for you? Or are you, doing more hiding, more inauthentic work? So doing all the things, yes, just to learn. It doesn't have to be for forever, but you have to learn, the language of your own energy. Where do I avoid things? Where do I feel like greenlit on things? What's exciting? What sucks the life out of me? What drains me, right? Once you can kind of start building a lot of consciousness around those cues, then you can actually create strategies that are better aligned once you have those cues and you've paid attention to them. And then on the flip side, knowing what you're designed to do. That's why I'm such a huge fan of human design and gene keys, and I use them inside of my business and I use them with my clients. Is not everyone is designed to show up every single day. Not everyone is designed to be consistent. There are people who are designed to be so potent that they get to show up on a Monday and then not show up again until next Tuesday, right? But
Yeah,
if they fall under this indoctrination of you have to post X many times a day, they're really just sucking their battery dry. And so when it matters, they're not going to be able to show up for their business. And so that's kind of the intermediary. Once you've proven to yourself that you can show up for the work, then we get to personalize the work. But until you can show yourself that you can be consistent with the strategy end of things, it gets really hard to personalize and optimize those things. Does
yeah,
that make sense?
absolutely. Thank you for that. I have
Mm-hmm.
one last question,
Yeah.
and that is, what are some daily practices that that you use to anchor yourself so that you keep on the right path, as you say it?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question, because some days I do a lot and some days I don't do a lot, and I graduate out of practices and rituals pretty consistently. Again, goes back to this narrative that do whatever you need to do to stay in it. The second you feel yourself start slipping, you need to have a list or a repertoire of things that you can immediately go, okay, I'm slipping. I know that if I don't catch this right now, it's not going to be awesome for me. So here's my list of practices. But human design gene keys always am hitting the books when I'm feeling something adverse. Human design has basically alignment versus unalignment themes for every energy type. And so once you know what your energy type is, they very clearly give you these unalignment themes. Mine is frustration. So in my business, if I'm doing something and the math is not mathing, things aren't clicking, instead of forcing those things like most people would, instead of leaning into the narrative that I have to figure it out, I lean into my human design, right? And I use those resources to actually help me pull back so that I can get the information that I need to in order to make better decisions. I also EFT specialist, so work with a lot of nervous system reprogramming, bringing and changing baselines in your nervous system so that when things do get heightened or there is a narrative that is completely unhelpful but has your nervous system just completely out of whack, we can help neutralize those things with better stories, reprogramming, all that good stuff. And I'm also a visualization meditation junkie. So I for sure meditate in the morning. And I'm also, which I think this is the biggest healing hack of all time. When you talk about manifesting, creating new identities, so much work happens while we sleep. That's why hypnotherapy, hypnosis is such an incredible resource because it puts you in that sleep state to actually make the changes that you want to make. I do visualizations and meditations as I drift off to sleep, and I basically set intentions for what I would like to experience the next day, who I would like to be, what narrative I'm shifting. And I find that when I wake up in the morning, you don't always notice those things right away, but as days play out, those things start to come true because you're utilizing like the true power of your subconscious without actually having to like block time out in your calendar from 8 to 9 a.m., you know what I mean, to meditate or visualize. So I bounce in between all of my modalities very efficiently, but I always lean on what's giving me the most life at this point in time, right? Once a practice starts to become obligatory or heavy, or there's a lot of pressure around it, I'm like, okay, maybe it's time to switch things up. And usually when I'm like, okay, it's time to switch things up, I get shown a new resource, or I have a new idea for a practice, or I lean on something new instead. And so it's all very, again, all very life-giving. When practices suck the life out of you, that's when they become not repeatable at all. So I'm a huge advocate of creating practices in ways that give you life and make you want to do them, as opposed to, the latter.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Tim.
Mm-hmm.
If people want to get in touch with you and work with you, or just get in touch with you, where can they find you?
On X or Twitter, my handle is Hayden_Flohr. My link tree is right there. So if you want to see what I'm working on, I've got some new programs coming up in the very near future. Private intensive, long-term private mentorship. And then I always say my content, if none of those are right for you right now, my content is the best place to be because you get a true dose of what it's going to take for those containers and those spaces to actually be able to work for you. All of the content is that foundational. So best place to be.
Thank you so much, Hayden. I truly enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate this, and thank you for having me here.